Hello. In this clip from our Justia webinar, Build Your All-Star Team with Inclusive Interviewing, Amal Yassin will share with you the final takeaways of how to avoid implicit bias and how to build an effective team by being inclusive. If you want to see more Justia videos on law practice and legal marketing, be sure to subscribe to our channel.
All right, so let's come to our conclusion. We're coming to an end of the program. Thank you so much for sharing this with me. I'm so happy. So the goal is to have organizations that reflect the racial, ethnic, cultural, religious, political, economic, and thought diversity of our country. Remember, we want that thought diversity. We want that thought diversity that comes from a range of experiences. Why do we want that? Because teams that are culturally diverse generally perform better and are more profitable. So we want this. We want this. We want this, and we want legal professionals who are part of the decision-making process and have access to leadership opportunities. It's not enough to just get through the interview process and you're there. You have to have access to leadership opportunities. You have to be able to grow within an organization because of an organization that respects you. Unfortunately, these goals are very often being thwarted by implicit bias, more often than explicit bias, and this implicit bias deeply impacts both recruiting and retention. And we discussed it. The phantom job openings, in which it's not a real authentic job opening. It's just being listed there for camouflage, right? Implicit bias in recruiting through these fit tests where you're saying, oh, do you want to have a beer with someone? No. Let's talk about real values here. Bias performance reviews where you saw the Thomas Mayer memo, where just because you know the person's race, you make assumptions about the person or the person's gender or sexual orientation, whatever it is, and it impacts the review process. And then we have these horrible microaggressions at work, which you may think, no big deal, toughen up. But again, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. It keeps happening, and people are going to flee your organization because they want to be in a place where they are respected. We went through all of the biases, so not all of them, some of the biases that occur during the interview process. The affinity bias, when you're saying, because this person went to my law school, because this person is from my neighborhood, they must be great. Hooray. We got to be more open-minded. Confirmation bias, where your previously held beliefs are causing you to look for things within that person's interview, resume, etc., that confirms what you already thought. The halo effect, when you think someone is amazing, the one positive aspect, and then you're overgeneralizing it and potentially missing out on red flags. It's opposite, the horn effect, when you see one negative thing and then you're not seeing the positive because it's impacting everything. The attribution effect, when you're taking one fact and you're attributing it to other things and you're not asking questions. So what do we do to get ourselves out of this? Mindfulness, connection, preset questions and rubrics, self-monitoring, and opportunities for advocacy. Thank you so very much. This is my information, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amal, for that wonderful presentation and joining us today for the Q&A session. We can now go ahead and take some audience questions. Thank you again for joining. We have a couple already, so I'll just go ahead and jump right in. But if you do have additional questions for Amal that you'd like to ask, you can always put them in that Q&A button at the control panel at the bottom of your screen, and we'll see those pop up. All right, so our first question is, as an employee who isn't necessarily a part of recruiting deliberations or policy discussions, what are some ways in which I can encourage my firm to participate in inclusive interviewing to build a diverse team?
Oh, thank you so much. I think that's a really, really wonderful question. And I think that because a person or when a person is not specifically involved with those policy discussions, there's even more of a wonderful impetus. And that can happen through emailing HR and telling them to watch this video. It can happen through you reviewing your own evaluation and saying, it's not clear to me what rubric is being used here. Shouldn't our organization have rubrics so that our evaluation process is fairer? I actually think that in some ways, coming from you, it is actually an even more important to a certain extent request, because it shows that people who are not necessarily being paid to do this, people who are not necessarily in this capacity, value it. It could happen by you, again, reaching out to HR and saying, oh, I looked at the list of new associates at the firm. I realize that most of them are from schools that are AmLaw top 10 or what have you. Have we been reaching out to others? Just because you are not necessarily in that job role does not mean that your voice does not matter.
Wonderful. Thank you for that insight. Our next question is, how do I explain microaggressions to coworkers who don't seem to understand?
Oh my goodness, that can be very difficult. So I would literally give them the definition. And the definition is this. Let's just give a very, very easy or simple definition. It is a slight. It is a slight that is based on a stereotype. And very often, this slight, which is based on a stereotype, may come across as a positive or a compliment when in fact the stereotype underlying it is very negative and very harmful. And so I would give them examples. I would say, oh, if you meet someone who's of Asian ancestry and say, you speak English so well, despite the fact the person was born in the United States and of course speaks English well, this is a microaggression. It sounds like a compliment. You speak English so well. But the underlying stereotype or assumption is that the person would not. So I would say that these are slights. These are very often insults that appear to be compliments, but are still insults because they are based on stereotypes. And I would let them know that although people think that they are harmless, over time, they really erode people's feeling of belonging. No one wants to have to explain him, her, or their self over and over again at an organization.
Thank you for that explanation. Our next question is, I don't live in a very diverse community, but I still want my firm to reflect the ways I value diversity. Do you have any advice on recruiting more of a diverse staff?
I love this question. What a powerful question. And I think that it's a really great question. And I think that many organizations are grappling with this in many creative ways. One creative way that you are aware of, I'm sure, remote work. I have consulted with many organizations that have increased their pool of candidates through remote opportunities. In this way, they are often recruiting diverse candidates that don't live nearby. Let's say the person lives 45 minutes or an hour away. That might be a long commute if you have to do it every day. But if it's one time every other week, I have a brother-in-law who has a system where he only had to go in every other Wednesday or what have you, then it's not so bad. So we can be creative about finding these solutions through the technology that we have. So what does that consist of? Very often it consists of remote work. And I would say often there may be people even within our locale. We just have to connect with the right recruiters, the right schools, the right networks, the right bar associations, etc., in order to find them.
Awesome. And I think the last question that we have time for is, what do you feel is the best way to practice eliminating the bias you mentioned? Should I practice interviews with friends or colleagues?
That is a really, really good question. And I do think that practicing is an absolutely wonderful idea. But more so than that, I feel as if we have to systematize the elimination of bias. So if you were to create a certain list of interview questions, and of course, based on the conversation, you probably will not be strict to the list. But if we just had an interview protocol that said, take a mindful moment, breathe in and out before the interview. You can do this with the interviewee. I'm very confident the interviewee would welcome it. If someone before an interview with all those nerves said, can we just take a moment and take a deep breath and I have a mindful moment? Oh, what a relief that would be, right? So we have the protocol in place in which we say, this is what we do when we are interviewing. We are taking a mindful moment. We are asking these questions. We're self-monitoring and saying, okay, are there some assumptions that are in my mind that are flowing that I'm not asking about and instead are going to cause me to create a potentially biased, negative or positive assumption about this person. And so I would say definitely practice. It's a beautiful idea, but certainly create a protocol. And I see one other question, but I might be able to tap. This is an anonymous attendee. What's the I, A, and T in LGBTQIA? So I is generally intersex. A is asexual, T is transgender. And so I hope that helps if you missed it during the program. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of your insight, Ama, and joining us today. And thank you all for all of your questions. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did enjoy it, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more law practice and legal marketing videos. See you in our next clip.